This will be an article reading. The article's in the description here. Say Somalia to most Americans, and they will likely have visions of civil war and chaos. While accurate in the early 1990s, these visions have not been the actual situation in Somalia for most of the last decade. Unfortunately, because of yet another international attempt to install a Somali government, these visions are again becoming increasingly accurate. Somalia has been without a national government since 1991, when dictator Siad Barre, I think that's how you pronounce it, was ousted from power. Somalia plunged into a civil war as rival factions attempted to establish a new government. Interventions by the U.S. and UN tended to unite the Somalis against the outsiders, resulting in the famous Black Hawk Down episode and ultimately the withdrawal of U.S. and UN forces. Once the UN withdrew, a relative peace developed in Somalia. Crime and violence persisted, but not at the levels seen during the Civil War. Various clan elders, warlords, and Islamic courts had power, but none were strong enough to impose themselves as the new government, and most of the fighting stopped. Once this relative peace was achieved, the Somalis began to order their affairs and adapt institutions to provide governance, even though they lacked a government. Most of the order was provided by Somalia's customary legal code, the Zir, which was interpreted by clan elders and informally enforced, mainly through ostracism. Islamic courts existed, but most had little influence. Islamic law was reserved mostly for matters of divorce and inheritance, while the common law covered everything else. Although Somalia is still poor, the ordered anarchy has existed since the mid-1990s and has actually translated into improved living standards. In 2005, Somalia ranked in the top 50% in 6 of our 13 measures, and ranked near the bottom in only 3: infant mortality, immunization rates, and access to improved water sources compared to other countries in Africa. This compares favorably with circumstances in 1990 when Somalia last had a government and was ranked in the bottom 50% for all 7 of the measures for which we had that year's data: death rate, infant mortality, life expectancy, main telephone lines, tuberculosis, and immunization for measles and DTP. Furthermore, we have found that during the last years of Somalia's government, 1985 to 1990, their performance was deteriorating compared to other African nations as their relative ranking fell in 5 of these measures. Since their governments collapsed, Somalia has seen its relative ranking improve in 4 of these measures and deteriorate in only 1, infant mortality. Perhaps most impressive is Somalia's change in life expectancy. During the last 5 years of government rule, life expectancy fell by 2 years, but since the state collapse, it actually has increased by 5 years. Only 3 African countries, Guinea, Gambia, and Rwanda, can claim bigger improvement. Telecommunications is another major area of success. With a variety of companies operating without burdensome government regulations, Somalia ranks high among African countries in the number of phone lines, mobile phone usage, and access to the internet. According to The Economist, a mobile phone call in Somalia is generally cheaper and clearer than a call from anywhere else in Africa. In fact, the ordered anarchy in Somalia attracted multinational corporations to the country. Coca-Cola, Dole, DHL, and affiliates of General Motors and British Airways, among others, began making investments in Somalia. Unfortunately, recent international efforts at establishing a new government in Somalia are likely to ruin what little economic progress the country has made. In 2004, the Transitional Federal Government, TFG, was created in exile with UN backing. In February 2006, it entered Somalia and so far controls only the town of Baidoa. The Somalis again have united against this attempt by outsiders to force government on them. Unfortunately, the result has been an increase in the power of the Union of Islamic Courts, the UIC, who, since June, have gained control over much of southern Somalia, including the former capital, Mogadishu. An estimated 600 militias have joined the UIC since the TFG moved into Baidoa in February. Every government of Somalia has exploited the country's population. International meddling created the TFG and, unintentionally, a more powerful UIC. If either group were to become a true government, the population likely will once again become oppressed. In the meantime, the two groups appear headed back into civil war, which will likely result in the kind of chaos the country has not experienced since 1995. Prime Minister Getty, I think that's how you pronounce it, of the TFG recently said, "It is totally misguided not to accept the government. The alternative is chaos. Unfortunately, he's got it exactly backwards. It is, in fact, the attempts to impose a government on Somalia that create chaos.
There's no central government to maintain the airports. We build the airports and we service the airports. The aircrafts that we use now can land on rugged and unpaved landing strips. We only fly when we are sure that's safe. You know, it's 14 years. We never had any problem of any sort. Everything is cash transaction. Our account is on board. If you buy now the ticket in Mogadishu, the money will go on the flight. It will go to Djibouti the same day. Well, sometimes it's difficult without having a government, and sometimes it is a plus not to have a government. Corruption is not a problem. Corruption is not a problem because there's no government. Yeah, because there's no government, yeah. When we started, there was anyone, but now there are 5 carriers in Somalia competing in that market. There's no regulation, and sometimes you need a government. Are these aircrafts they are using being properly maintained? Are they up to the standards? Are they compliant to certain regulations? Are they safe enough for transportation of passengers? There are price wars. The price went down. There's no coordination between them, but still it's good for the people.
All the talk about how will roads be maintained and all that is just irrelevant nonsense. People solve problems all the time. And I swear, I feel like everyone's a chicken little about this. How will roads be maintained? How will private police work? How will private healthcare work? How will private firefighters in Tucson possibly work? And on and on and on. And you create logical proofs about how people can solve problems and how the perverse incentive structures of government just create complete non-answers that people have to struggle through. Yet you still get people wanting you to describe in intricate detail how 300 million people will solve every conceivable problem under the sun. And if you can't, then that's evidence that only men in funny hats with guns can get us to do what we tell them to tell us to do. I mean, look, there's Somalia. They just got away from their government abuser, and now they are fighting against the whole world, which is trying to force another abuser government on them. Which, of course, shamelessly and ruthlessly spews its filth about how Somalia needs another abuser to be safe.